I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan. You should be watching the Crew Reviews.
Hey everybody, welcome. We got Hank Phillippi Ryan today.
Hey, some class in here. All right.
Yeah, definitely class. So welcome. I gotta say, The First to Lie, your latest thriller, is a timely story about deceit, justice, and revenge. Can you tell our audience the inspiration for this awesome story?
Oh gosh, thank you. Yes, deceit. That is always timely, isn't it? And especially so now. And one of the things I love to think about is, to get to the first to lie, one of the things I love to think about is, what does truth mean? Is there a true truth? What is it? What somebody tells you? Is it what you hope is true? It's what, is it what you wish were true? It's what you tell yourself is true, what you tell others. And so, as an investigative reporter, I've been a television reporter for 43 years. As a television reporter, this is what I think about all the time, to try to get to the truth. And several years ago, you're talking about where the story came from. Several years ago, I was doing an investigative story about doctors, the legal history of doctors in Massachusetts, and how patients were supposed to find out whether a doctor had had many malpractice losses. I know malpractice lawsuits are, part of doing business sometimes, but how many losses they'd had, how much they'd had to pay in damages. So my producer and I, and it was not public, to find that out, you'd have to go to every single courthouse in the state and look up the doctor's name, and then look up what the cases were, and then try to decipher what the results were, because sometimes the results can be deceiving, as you say. So I went to the head of the Board of Registration and Medicine in Massachusetts, and I said to her, how are people supposed to know, how are patients supposed to know their doctor's legal histories? And she said, well, ask them and they will tell you. And I'm like, no, they won't.
Let me tell you, that's not really true.
Right. So my producer and I, a man named Chris, dressed up as a husband and wife who were looking to have a child. And I was undercover with no makeup. You would not recognize me, trust me. My hair in a bun on the top of my head, and big glasses, and like 3 sweatshirts. So I just didn't look like me. And I always change my voice a little bit. But what the doctor didn't know, that under my sweatshirt, that the buttonhole on my shirt over my sweatshirt was not a button. It was a camera lens. And snaking down underneath my sweatshirts was the wire to the hidden camera that was in my oh so glamorous fanny pack that I was wearing.
You were wired up.
And he didn't. And it is really terrifying to go undercover. We can talk about that, because you're always aware of it, and you have to keep saying to yourself, the other guy doesn't know. The other guy doesn't know. And and you have to really be the person you're pretending to be, but keep that little sliver of who you really are. So anyway, we asked doctor after doctor after doctor who we knew had malpractice losses, whether they had, and of course they said no. They all said no, and we got it all on tape. And as a result of that story, the rules were changed in Massachusetts to make that kind of information public. So that's great, and that's really wonderful. But what struck me about it so many years later, when I was thinking about this book, is that those doctors had lied to me. They had not told me the truth in order to get me to hire them as my doctor, in order to get money, in order to further their career. So that lying was bad. But I was lying too as a reporter, right? As an undercover. I was not saying, I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan from Channel 7, and I'm here to hear if you'll tell me the truth. I was lying to the doctor myself, but I was lying for good. So does that make it okay? And it just made me think about how we all lie every day, and we pretend to be who we need to be at the time. And I started thinking, what if being someone else could get you what you want? And therein is the essence of The First to Lie. The world's longest answer. I could have just,
I love that.
I could have just said, yeah, I don't know. It just came out of nowhere.
I could have done the rest of my life.
That's why we do this show.
Dude, I loved it. Answer all your questions, all of our questions like that.
People ask me why I left medicine. Well,
because there were always undercover reporters coming in trying to find out things, right?
Yeah.
You have just put me into the PTSD mode here. All right. So The First to Lie is a standalone psychological suspense novel. So how do you decide going to put your free time into a project that's a kind of a one-off versus an adventure like in your Jane Ryland or Charlotte McNally series? What sort of decision-making tree do you go through in order to get to that point?
I love that you say decision and decide as if it's a thing that I actively, practically, with intent do. Nothing could be further from the truth. There's a thing about stories that sometimes a story can only be told. A group of people can only have one story that's the most important thing that ever happened in their life. And you know that they all had lives before the book, and they'll have lives, some of them, after the book. But this thing that happened is the most important thing that will ever happen to them. In a series like my Charlotte McNally series, the 4 of them, and the 5 and more to come Jane Ryland series, you're sort of on the train with Jane Ryland, let's say, an investigative reporter, and Jake Brogan, a Boston detective. And every story will be Jane on the trail of a big investigation and Jake on the trail of a murder investigation. And those two stories will come together somehow to make this whole. And that story will be finished and told and ended. But Jake and Jane can always go off and have new stories and new murder investigations, because that's what reporters and police officers do. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. So quickly in a series, the suspense, the challenge for the author is that the suspense can't come from the mortality of the main characters, right? It's going to have to be suspense for some other reason, because Jane and Jake are not going to die in book 4, because there's going to be book 5 and 6 and 7 and whatever. So, and the reader knows that, right? The reader knows that. And so as an author, I have to keep you reading and turning the pages as fast as you can by some other means than the mortality of the main character. But in a standalone, this is a powerful storytelling tool, because anybody can be good and anybody can be bad, and anybody can start out bad and end up good, and start out good and end up bad, and anybody can be lying, and anybody can be guilty, and anybody can die. Anybody can die in a standalone, right? Because it's over. Yeah. And so my readers are smart. All of my readers are smart. And in a standalone, they don't know what's going to happen, right? Cool, because there are no expectations except for a good story. And that is the power of that, the feeling of that story. Choosing, as you say, to make it be a standalone, is that this is going to be this one fabulous occurrence in these people's lives. And nothing before and nothing after will ever be this fascinating or important, but you, the reader, is going to hear this now. And that's what I really love about it. It's really a powerful way to tell a story. And my job as a writer then is to know that you're smart and that you're going to keep guessing. And then I get to say, yeah, you think you know what's going to happen. Watch now. Watch
turn the page. Turn the page.
Quick follow-up to that. Is there a different level of pressure continuing the series versus writing a standalone? Like, do you feel a little bit more, I don't even constrained when you're writing a series versus a standalone?
I know exactly what you're asking. I think I'm reading your mind, but it's a different feeling because the pressure of writing a series is it has to be new, but the same. Right. And so I have my characters and I have this setting and I have their goals and I have who their personalities are, but I have to inject a brand new thing into it. The books have to feel like a Hank book, but different every time. Ooh, did you read the one about this?
Right.
And so the pressure is to come up with the hooky thing for each book. But the cool part is that I have my people, and I have my core people, and that's good. And I have my core Boston, and that's good. Yeah. In a standalone, the pressure is to come up with this one fantastic, out of the ballpark, grand slam idea and make that be the book. So the pressure is really equal for each of them because I just sent in my 13th book. The cover just came out, which is gorgeous, called Her Perfect Life, and it comes out in September. And I try to be better and better and better with each book, not only as a storyteller, but as a writer and as a person who gives you, something really fun to read. So the pressure, it gets harder and harder to write each book, even though I know more and more. I know so much now that I know that this is really hard, and to have a terrific book is just infinitely harder than you could ever imagine. And I'm always raising the bar on myself in writing these. So people don't say, well, she mailed in that one. I want people to say, wow, how does she do it? Frankly, is what I want people to say. And so that's a lot of pressure. That's just a lot of pressure. And I have to tell you that, you see, the Agatha Awards behind me and those kinds of things. And there are days when for every single book I've ever written, every single one, from the first one to the 13th one, there are days when I think, I cannot do this. I forgot how to write a book. I'm sure you've heard this from all your authors.
It's amazing. We have. It's crazy. It's so
and
true.
You just think, I don't know how I did it before, and I'm sure I didn't write all those books. I don't know how I did that, but even if I did, I can't do it again. And you learn that there's this arithmetic to it. It's just addition, and I think I'll come to my desk and I think I'm going to write my 1,000 words. And then I think, not a chance. Then I think you have to, or you're not having dinner. So what are you going to do? And so that's a big incentive. No wine, I'm going to write.
What?
And I start writing and I think, man, this is terrible. This is the most terrible thing that anybody will have ever read in their entire life. And then I think, I'll fix it tomorrow. And I just keep typing. And that's how I've done it for all of these books. It's crazy. Why we do this.
Have to.
Well, and it's also the fun, I can tell you, it's also the fun of when you get a good idea. That is the fuel that drives us all, isn't it? That moment when you think, oh, yeah.
Right.
I tell my wife that all the time.
That's actually a great segue to what I want to ask you. In the First to Lie is full of twists. It's full of, shifting points of view and characters whose motives you have no idea. You question through the end of the book. You question after you put the book down. Do you start out with those twists in your head at all? Or do those reversals and mysteries just kind of present themselves as you're writing the story?
Every time I write a book, every time I begin to write a book, I say, this time I'm going to do it like a grown-up. I'm going to get an outline. And then I can't do it. I can't do it. And I think, why am I going to spend all this time on an outline when it's not going to turn out to be like that anyway? Just sit down and start writing. So in answer to your question, I have no idea what's going to happen. None, no twists, not a thing.
Wow.
In the First to Lie, I knew one thing. I knew the which we can't talk about. I knew the one hook, that's this tragedy of writing thrillers. People say, what's the story? And I'm like, yeah, I can't tell you. But anyway, I knew one thing, but I didn't know anything else. And so it's an interesting tightrope to walk, to write a book without an outline. Because the only way I know what happens next is when I sit down at my computer and write it. So that's what gets me to the computer every day, is I just think, I wonder what's going to happen. I have to find out.
That's exciting.
And that's how it gets there.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
I know. So people say, wow, the end of The Murder List or the end of The First to Lie, you really surprised me. And I'm like, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? So talk about a surprise ending or a surprise middle or a surprise beginning. I surprise myself all the time. And Sue Grafton used to call that the magic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The magic of writing, that something happens and we just don't know.
Yeah. Who were we talking to, boys? Where it was one author who said, they got hate mail or somebody responded to a review and said, I knew exactly what was going to happen right after that. And the author was like, well, that's funny because I didn't. I had no idea that was coming.
Yeah.
I have seen that in some reviews, and I think that's one of my favorite things, because I think, oh, you did, huh? Because I didn't know. The other one, I had one review once that said, a reporter would never do that.
Oh,
and I thought, yeah, I kind of know.
kind of my thing.
So, I mean, you don't just nilly-willy just write. I mean, you do some research on the stuff, obviously. So Pharmanex, a pharmaceutical company, and the fertility drug it developed to help women get pregnant, it looms large in the story. So what kind of research did you do in preparing to write it? I mean, did you dive into like journals and stuff? Or what did you do to get that information out?
I interviewed several pharmaceutical salespeople, pharmaceutical reps, the people who go from doctor's office to doctor's office with their duty bags of samples and
free lunches.
Information to try to sell. Try to sell their wares. And I really thought about how much they know and how much they don't know and what their goals are. And I wanted to elicit from them the pressure they felt to sell the drugs and how they felt when the drugs were fabulous, that they knew they were wonderful, or how they felt when they, when you think about side effects. One of the things that was important to me in this book is when there's a medication that's really amazingly miraculous for most people, but really harmful for a few people, how the difference in how you look at that, if you're the many or the few, and how pharmaceutical companies feel about that. And I also talked to several researchers, medical researchers who have worked on the production and development of new medications to talk about how that works and how that goes and how they think and what they hope and, what testing means and how that works. And so then I take all this research and I just fill my head with it. And then I just don't ever look at it again. I want the book isn't about that, right. The book is about the pharmaceutical industry and how it works and how people sell things and what doctors do. It's just not about that. It has the underpinnings of that,
right? But
it's about the people who inhabit that world, who are patients mostly, doctors sometimes. So if I go in as a patient, I'm not really thinking about all that background of pharmaceutical research and sales that's behind me. I'm trusting the doctor to do to tell me something true. And there you have the story, right? That's what that's about. It's about the individual people who inhabit the world that I'm creating. So I let the research go because I know so much about it, and then write the book from the point of view of a person who knows about it. Character.
I always knew within 10 seconds when a rep actually believed in the product and what they were coming in, because I knew there's certain drugs that we could talk about that are in the news even today that I knew within 10 seconds that this is bad news. So
really, I'd love to hear about that. I should have talked to you before the book.
You'll write another one, I'm pretty sure. Well, speaking of your storied career as an investigative reporter, does that provide you the juice for your literary side, or do you consciously keep the two separate, as writing is this thing and my reporting is this thing, or is this feeding this? How does that work for you?
Yeah, what a fun question. Thank you. I got the fact and fiction part separate. I keep that really separate. And one of the things that happened to me when I started writing fiction, when I was 55, which was 15 years ago, which is crazy. One of the things I wondered was whether I could make stuff up. That was what was the thing that sort of stumped me, because I'd spent all those years, 30 some at the time when I started writing fiction, only saying what I could gather by research. My sound bites were real dialogue that people said, and the setting was the setting, and the story was the story, and the facts were the facts as I could best know them. And I would put those together into a story. And that's the cool part, because when I was doing it as an investigative reporter, when I'm still doing it as an investigative reporter, I learned over all those years that I was essentially telling a story every day, right? With a beginning and a middle and an end, with a character who you cared about, and an important problem that needed to be solved, where the good guys would win and the bad guys would get what's coming to them. And in the end, you want some justice and you want to change the world a little bit. And isn't that just the same as writing a thriller? It is exactly the same as writing crime fiction. So there could be no better experience or training or practice for being a crime fiction writer than being an investigative reporter, a storyteller. So not to mention all, public speaking and promotion and headline writing and, that kind of thing. It has been part of my life for so long. So all that goes together.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I want to kind of stick with the investigative reporter thread. In a place like Boston, I imagine being an investigative reporter, you're going to go down some treacherous paths every now and then. What was the most harrowing experience you had chasing a story?
Well, there have been, I've been threatened and I've been stalked, and people come to my house, and parenthetically, and you didn't know this, but parenthetically, that's what my new book is about. Her Perfect Life is about the relentlessness of the spotlight and how people always know where you are. When I lived in Atlanta years ago, I was the weekend anchor for a station in Atlanta. And my house was broken into and robbed while I was on the air because I wasn't home. They knew I wasn't home. I was live, at the station. So that kind of, there's a threat. There are threats like that. I go to the grocery store and people know who I am. So I have to be a certain person. But from the standpoint of dangerousness, I've gone undercover with a hidden camera into places that people, a cult church, a seafood manufacturing company where they wouldn't want me to be there. It's not illegal. You're allowed to do it, but they're not going to say, "Oh, ha, 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 you're such a cutie. You really shouldn't be in here, honey. Could you just please leave?" It's not like that.
It's Boston.
So at every turn, I was doing a story once about fish, and in someone's office, and a guy came in, and he was not happy with me, and a guy came in and sort of closed the door behind him and stood in front of the door. And that sort of stuff is intimidating. I mean, nobody's ever shot at me. I mean, that's knock on wood.
Hank, let me ask you, have you ever had a producer say, "No, we're not doing that"?
Yeah.
Like, you're not going that route. Or is he like, "Yeah, get in there, go"?
I've never had a producer say, let's not do this. It's interesting because, the producer isn't there.
Right. They're not the one at risk.
It's mostly me. But when I'm not undercover, I'm with the photographer. It's television. So that's kind of one of the good parts is that, I've always said to my photographers, if somebody wants to haul off and hit me, just make sure you're rolling on that. Because we need to get the video. That's
evidence.
There was a time when I was doing a story about a guy who was just sort of a creepy, weird guy who was ripping people off. And so we were standing outside the office where he was waiting. We were standing actually in the lobby of the building where he was. And we were waiting for him to come downstairs to ask him a question. And I had two photographers, one inside and one outside, to make sure that if something happened, we would all get it on video. So this guy, I hear walk down the stairs, and then his footsteps stopped. Then he had clearly seen me, and then he decided to just run out. So he ran down the stairs and shoved me aside. I mean, whammed me aside, and I fell. Yes. And then he went out. So of course, how dumb is that? Because we had the photographer outside getting the whole thing, and the photographer inside getting the whole thing. And I'm like, great, this is good.
TV.
Good.
Your husband wants to kill him.
And so we fed the video back to the station, and I got a call from the promotion department saying, we're going to put this right on the air. It's a perfect promo. And we're going to use the part where what you said when the guy pushed you down. And I said, and this is interesting from the standpoint of eyewitnesses, I said, I didn't say anything. And the promo department says, oh, yeah, you did. And I thought, well, what? I honestly didn't remember it. And I would always think my mom would have been so proud of me because what I said was, please, sir, don't push me down. And so
polite.
Wasn't it just so polite? And a couple things about that, though, from the standpoint of writing a story. My reporters in my novels don't swear because you can't. Because if you swear in real life, then you will when you're live in a situation like that, and you can't use the audio. So people laugh at me for how, I say, oh, golly, and they say, oh, golly, like that's so silly. But no, that's me training my synapses not to say anything that I can't say on the air. And the other thing is what good evidence that was that he pushed me, because, spontaneously I said, don't push me down.
Yeah.
And so, which meant that he did. So all that's all subtext and context, nice. And more than is on the surface. And the world's longest answer. Forget
let's take a step back though, just for a second. What is it about the mystery genre that drew you in as a child? Because I read that it was a very strong draw.
I'm thinking about that because it's just such a fun thing to talk about. And it's interesting because any writer that you talk about, any crime fiction writer that you talk about, had some gateway mysteries that they read, and that there was something about that that drew them in. I mean, I loved Sherlock Holmes. Every Sherlock Holmes short story and novella, I just devoured them. And, it was starting when I was about, how old would you be? 9, 10, some age like that. And I really began to hear that there was this music of the story, that it would sort of go a certain way, and there would be a rhythm to it. And there were clues and characters and a puzzle, and then you could figure something out. I really liked the figure something out part. And I would try to see if I could solve the crime before Sherlock did. And that's fun, And then I also remember when I started reading all the Golden Age authors, Niall Marsh and Josephine Tey and Marjorie Ellingham and Dorothy Sayers. And I loved those books. And then I remember reading so vividly. I remember reading Murder on the Orient Express.
Classic.
And I remember thinking, wait a minute, wait, how did she do that? And I went back to see, the architecture of
the
that
setup.
book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And everything was there. All the clues were there. She had just done this fabulous sleight of hand, Agatha Christie had just done this fabulous sleight of hand by making me or allowing me or leading me to think one thing, because I know about mysteries. Somebody did it. Which one of these people did it? And so I had that template in my head of what it had to be, and she wasn't doing that, and that cleverness then was the other thing, besides a good story and a good puzzle, the cleverness of a smart author who could sort of lead you down this path and then at the end say, ha ha, didn't I fool you? I mean, you remember when you read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd and you thought, wait, no way. And that's fun, isn't it? When you read a book that's so good that the author can outwit you.
Oh yeah,
right.
But you have to reread. You have to reread the page a couple times. You're like, wait a minute,
and then you go back, right? You go back and think, well, didn't he or didn't she say?
And you're like, oh my gosh, how did it not click?
Yeah,
It'd be cool if you can do that as a writer.
And that's my goal. That is my complete goal: is to be writing something that I hope you take one way, that later turns out to be something else. That is what I completely love.
Oh,
and I love it too. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be, that it's going to be that, so I'm sort of having the fun with myself as well.
Well, for us mere mortals, either one of your careers would have been a triumph in and of itself. We won't go into all the awards because we don't have that much time today. well, at this stage,
just look behind.
It'll be in the intro.
At this stage of your careers, a lot of people could say,
wait a minute, hold on. There's more up top. That's
what? It just keeps going.
Isn't that funny? I'm so happy about. We worked hard for those.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
And the cool part about it is that I'm fixing my screen again now. Yeah. The cool part of that is that every single one of those Emmys means that there was a secret that we revealed that someone didn't want you to know. And that is exactly the same as writing crime fiction.
Yeah, it's one and the same. That's awesome. Well, then let me ask you this. You've been with so much success on both sides, and at this point of your experience, we'll just leave it at that. You could put the car in neutral and just kind of ride out all the success that you've attained. So what is it at this stage that's your driving force to continue to produce this level of writing as well as your reporting? I mean, I don't know anybody that works as hard as you.
Could you just say that success part a couple more times?
Sure.
I think it's interesting. I mean, it's really fascinating for me to hear you say that, and I'm grateful and thank you. But I wonder if any of us ever feels like we're really a success. Yeah. That's maybe that's a psychological thing.
Moving target.
Yeah, I think it is a moving target, and it is one of the things that I kind of work on with myself a little bit, is to remember to be happy, because I do think that a lot of us, all of us, I bet, want something and work for something, then we get it, and then we say, oh, well, that really wasn't anything. But now, and you raise the bar and raise the bar and raise the bar, and you forget to be happy about the thing that was the only thing you wanted a minute ago.
Right.
And so I'm sort of trying to remember to be happy. I'm grateful every moment of every day about this. This is a very difficult job that we all have. And every writer will tell you that, there are days when you think, I'm just not doing this anymore. It's too hard. And then you have a good idea and you think, well, I won't do it anymore later. But right now I'm going to do this because I really love it. I love, I love the brain work of coming up with a good story. And then I adore the revision and making the story better. And making it shine. So in answer to your question, I know you're thinking like, yeah, about time, sister. In answer to your question, I'm always trying to see if I can be better at it. I'm always trying to see if I can just do it again and better.
It's the
And
challenge, right?
That's really fun for me.
Yeah, it's the challenge.
Yeah. Successful people. That's usually the motto, that mantra.
But the other aspect of your success is you're a good cheerleader. Like I see you cheering for other authors and encouraging people who, some of them are your level, some of them are well below you, some of them are maybe even, at the top, but you're always pushing. You're always saying things to people that make them want to continue doing what they're doing. I think that's successful. But
that's so nice. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's what you all do too, right? Though,
Yeah,
I mean, this
we're
is
trying
about, and very successfully, talk about successfully, you guys. I mean, this is what you do, and you introduce readers to new authors. And how are we supposed to know without people like you, especially now that the world's completely insanely nuts?
Right.
You do such a valuable service, and we all work individually, and we need to be a community, and you all are such a wonderful part of that community. I'm proud to be part of it too.
Oh, thanks.
Well, we appreciate that. We do aim to do that. I mean, we do aim to help the community, but I want to ask you another question about your crazy life, in a good way. I mean, crazy. From the outside looking in, you appear to be in perpetual motion. Maybe COVID slowed certain aspects down a little bit, but under normal conditions, how do you carve out time to write? How do you adapt to your surroundings enough to dial into your story every day?
I don't exactly look at it as carving out time to write. I'm thinking about it. This is true. I hope I think about it as I'm a writer and there are other things that are around me. So it's protecting. I sort of talk about protecting my writing time. I just protect it as well as I possibly can. I think that I've learned, for instance, that one of my favorite places to write is on a plane. I can get so much written on a plane because you're just in this. Remember airplanes? We used to go places. You would get on the plane.
I've heard about that.
You'd get off, and like hours later, you were someplace else. But you got to have popcorners and Diet Coke and wine if it was night.
Vaguely.
Because you're in this place where nobody can bother you, and I can put in earbuds and have silence and just work on my book. And I get a lot done. I mean, I thank JetBlue, for instance, because that's where the 1st of July got finished. I had my big idea about on the 1st of July, writing on JetBlue cross country, because I was so insulated and so by myself. So I do think that, sitting here, right here is where I generally write. And sometimes I think I better do the laundry. I have to take out something for dinner. Maybe I should do X, Y, and Z, or maybe I should just check my email. But on a plane, you can't do that. So, writing is my job, and so I have to do that. I mean, that's the deal that I've made with my darling publisher, Forge, is that I'm going to provide them the best book I possibly can at a certain time.
Right.
And so, if you were pick a job, you wouldn't think, I'm not really going in today. They won't care, because they do care. And right. And I'm the boss of me now in that particular thing. And pleasing the boss is a good thing. And there's nothing more pleasant than getting my words done. So the hardest,
I would just say,
the hardest part is starting. So what I do is I make an appointment with myself. And I say, without guilt, that I can do whatever I want until noon, without guilt, whatever it is. And then at noon, I say, at noon I'm writing, and that's the deal I make. And that sort of works, that discipline.
Butt in the chair. I would just say, if I was sitting near you or behind you or next to you on an airplane, I would totally look over your shoulder.
People do that. People totally do that. When I'm on a plane, thank you. It's impossible. When somebody's writing a book, you can see.
You can tell.
Like, what are you writing? Oh my God!
You can see the layout of the page, and you can see real fast typing and then no typing. And then real fast typing and then no typing.
It's about a plane crash.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, so following the thread of being dialed into your story, I won't give away any spoilers, but as we alluded to earlier, the first lie, the story unfolds through multiple points of view. So let me ask you, did you suffer from dissociative identity disorder after you finished writing this story?
That's a great question. No, I know this. I know. I mean, I can seriously tell you there are 4 points of view, and I understood them. You know, this is kind of that's one of the things that my brain sort of has, is that when I'm writing a person, if it's Ellie in the book, or Nora or Lacey or Brooke, the 4 points of view, I am that person when I'm writing that person. I can feel my posture be different and my attitude be different, and that person's voice comes out. That's I'm so happy you asked me that, because that's one of the really fun parts, is that it is not difficult for me to keep those people, those just 4 people. If the readers can keep us 4 separate, they can keep Ellie and Nora and Brooke and Lacey separate. Right. It's not that big of a deal. So
it's almost like method acting, right? Like totally. Yeah.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. And that's fun. And that's why sometimes they'll say things that I didn't expect, because I am that person. And I think, okay, well, that's pretty interesting. Thank you.
Let's go down that road.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to give a gold star to Chris for saying dissociative identity disorder.
Do you know I had to write that up phonetically?
If you can give me the ICD-9 code for that, I'd be really impressed.
Yeah.
So your work as a journalist has changed laws. It's changed lives. So what single experience in your career provides you with the most satisfaction?
Wow. Well, we did one story, which I love. I think 3 of those Emmys are for it. Was for a story that we did about real estate redlining, and how banks were not giving loans in lower economic areas. And we found out why, and we found out how the banks were involved, and it was all about third-party lending and phony mortgages and signing over. It's too complicated to tell, but it was 3 laws were changed in the mortgage lending, mortgage banking, and home improvement contractor industry in Massachusetts as a result of those stories. I got people's homes out of foreclosure that had been improperly foreclosed on. Got people's homes back to them.
Yeah, it's huge.
So really changes how you look at neighborhoods when you know the people who live there, and you know what happened to them, and you know why it happened. That was a life-changing thing, yes, for them, but truly for me in so many ways. And another story that we did, we discovered that there were thousands of mistakes every year in the Massachusetts 911 system, where emergency responders, police and firefighters went to the wrong address, responded to the wrong addresses, because the database was wrong. So people would call for, an ambulance or the fire department, and it would show up at the wrong place thousands of times a year.
Really?
And I had to work for a year making public records requests in order to, the State Telecommunications Board, I say that name, the State Telecommunications Board said to me that they were not a state agency and therefore were not subject to the public records laws. And I'm like, you're a public agency, give me those
things. Excuse
me? So we finally had to get the Attorney General to order them to give us the records. Wow. And when of all the mistakes, which they had, but in no order, and they arrived at my desk in a big brown cardboard box. And as if somebody had thrown up, a million pieces of paper and then put them in a box and said,
done on purpose. Totally done on purpose.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so I spent the entire weekend actually, sorting pieces of paper, individual pieces of paper, into 361 piles, how many cities and towns there are in Massachusetts. And at the end of that Sunday night, I was the only person in the universe who knew how many mistakes had been made in each town in Massachusetts. it was such a task that I had paper cuts all over my hands,
Hmm.
and there was blood on the documents.
Jeez.
So now my producer and I, whenever we talk about a good story, we ask, was there blood on the documents? That means it's a good story.
I'm writing that down.
Also
It gives
good
me
book
chills to hear those stories. That's
Thank you. And well, the point of it is, and I know you're wishing there were one, they changed the rules in Massachusetts about the 911 system. They fired the director of 911 and set up a whole new system.
Wow.
And so that's
good work, man.
I totally just stole that, by the way. Is there blood on the documents?
yeah.
Stole it.
Anytime.
Stole it.
That's my husband who just walked by. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey.
So you've had two distinct, there are similarities, but they're distinctly different careers. They're completely different circles that you're running in each career. Did you have, I'm sure you had a lot of people along the way that you got a tidbit or two from, but did you have a key mentor in either field?
It's interesting question because in television, when I started in radio in 1970, they didn't want women in radio stations, and I was not welcome. I can tell you that on my first day as a reporter, there was a note under my typewriter roller. Remember typewriters?
Yeah.
That I could not I would not be able to say to you in this program.
Unbelievable.
And so often during those early days, people who were my fellow journalists did everything they could to make my life be miserable for a long time. A long time. I finally, years later, there was no, not really. I mean, I had journalists who I revered, Walter Cronkite we're talking about,
Sure.
Huntley and Brinkley, and that level of person, Jim Lehrer.
Yeah.
Back in those days. As a grown-up, as a writer, oh my golly, just so many amazingly wonderful people who took me under their wing from moment one. Sue Grafton and I got to be real pals. And
awesome.
At the beginning, Lee Child, was just as kind and generous and supportive as any person could possibly be. And I could be here all day. I'm not going to say any more names because I will leave someone out.
Yeah,
and
we know that
don't.
feeling. Yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
Well, we don't like to leave on a note like that. So let's spice it up a little bit. Let's go into the lightning round where we're going to ask you silly, ridiculous questions because we're silly, ridiculous men. And hopefully you give us silly, ridiculous answers.
Here we go.
I'm going to start off asking 3 questions. Okay. I heard that you were a Shakespeare major in college. Talked about that very briefly just before. So if you were to introduce someone to Shakespeare, which play, short story, or novella would you hand them?
Hamlet. Hamlet.
Ooh.
Definitely so. So much in that, so much storytelling, so much wonderful characterization. It's a murder mystery.
Yeah, it is.
Isn't it? And it's a play within a play and all those fantastic language. And I think I could tell you a million of them, but that would be my first.
Nice. That's your one. Okay, cool. What's the strangest note or letter you've received from a reader or fan? The strangest one, or the one just like boggles the mind?
I can tell you this. I will tell you this really quickly. Forgive me, but I got a call. It was more like it was a call. And the caller had this very confident voice. And, I get a lot of tips. So when I sort of gauge someone's voice to see whether it sounds like they're telling me something real. And this person was so confident. And he said, the explosion they had last week at the paint factory that killed 2 people in whatever town it was. I'm like, yes, I do. And he said, I know why that happened. And I said, you do? And he said, yes, there was a laboratory in the basement of that paint factory that was illegal. So I said, oh my gosh, tell me about that. How do you know that there was this illegal lab in the basement? And he said, I belong to an organization that does inspections of those kinds of labs. And we were just in there. So I thought, really? Oh, okay. But I didn't want them to call Channel 5. So I thought, okay. And so I said, okay, well, what's the name of your organization that inspects these labs? And he said, the Ashtar Intergalactic Command.
What?
You know,
It's
So bizarre.
Well, if he was telling the truth, that's a hell of a story.
see, that even crossed my mind. I almost said, can you tell me more about that?
He actually believes that is his truth.
The aliens are real. Dude, that's crazy.
Oh.
You're like, thank you very much.
Click.
No, I told him to call Channel 5. I
Yeah,
gave
there you go.
my counterpart at that station, I gave them her home phone number.
Oh my gosh. I shouldn't even say this, but when I was in the Secret Service, we would get crazy people call the duty desk, and we would pick it up, and it was always the same. And we had Brian could probably get in trouble for this, but we had a direct dial number we would press and send it to the FBI, the regional office. And it would go right to them.
I knew I liked you.
And then they would totally do it to us backwards. Like, damn the FBI.
That's great. So they knew it was you.
Oh, always. It was so bad.
You have
All right.
such a wonderful law enforcement community. It's so adorable.
Yeah, we all loved each other and hated each other.
Yeah.
All right. So here's my last question. While you were writing The First Lie, how long did it take to get this song out of your head when you were done?
Thanks, Chris.
It wasn't in my head when I was writing it, but it's in my head now.
There it is.
Thank you very much.
But you gotta love the
welcome.
anyway.
All right, I'm up
Thanks
here.
a lot.
All right.
I'm gonna sing "It's a Small World" after all.
Oh man.
Yeah. So ha ha.
All right, my first question is this. All right, let's stir up the hornet's nest. Who makes the best lobster roll?
Okay, so if I tell you my answer to this, talk about the hornet's nest, but lobster rolls are too mayonnaisey for me.
Ooh.
I'd rather have plain lobster or grilled lobster. And the best grilled lobster I've ever had was at a restaurant called Sunshines in Nevis.
Sunshines.
Oh,
Write
wow.
that down, East Coast folks.
So Sunshines in Nevis, and they have grilled lobster that they make on the beach and a drink called the Killer Bee.
We can't
no
even
one-
get there yet.
No, I used to go to the wedding all the time up in New Hampshire, and it was just amazing. All right, number
I
2.
wrote that down though.
No, what did you say? Tell me that restaurant again.
Called the Weather Vane up in
Weather
Nashua,
Vane.
and there's like 3 or 4 of them up in that kind of neck of the woods. Oh, so good.
Someday when we can go places again.
How about it? Okay. Second question. This is a really important one. What's your opinion on a proposed Hank Phillippi Ryan slaughter rule in publishing that only allows you to win the Agatha or the Anthony Award every other year?
Only every other year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like not every year?
No. See, it's called the slaughter rule for a reason.
Yeah, I know. She it's a problem.
All right.
Next question.
Okay, we'll move on. Does your GPS ever swear out loud trying to make sense of the street layout of the Boston area?
Oh my golly, is it not crazy?
It's the worst.
It is really the worst. And the other problem with it is that I have a serious problem with right and left. I don't know if it's being left-handed or not. I'm not sure. But I'll say to my husband, turn left. And he'll start to turn left. And I'm like, no, the other left.
The other way.
And, so, if the streets weren't bad enough, my own sense of direction is inevitably wrong. I am inevitably wrong. If someone says which way to go, I say, I think go this way. So that means go that way. But that means probably this way is right because so don't even talk to me about direction.
Ooh,
But yes, Boston is completely crazy.
So you just end up sitting there in one spot. Not moving.
Blocking the tunnel.
And by the way, her GPS does not swear. It says golly.
Golly.
Golly, yeah.
Oh, golly. I
course
had
it
no
does.
idea.
Golly.
Yes, good call.
Okay, your last three questions come from me, and the first one is: what movie had the best depiction of investigative journalism?
Oh, Spotlight. Did you see Spotlight?
Not yet. I haven't seen it. No.
Oh my gosh.
No.
Go. You have time now.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
That was really a wonderful movie. Sadly, about the Globe Spotlight team, which uncovered the sexual abuse by priests in Massachusetts and everywhere. And it's just this really gritty, unglamorous journalism team and it shows the hard work and it shows what you have to do. It shows that you have to know, every reporter knows you may just have one question and you got to know what your one question is, because that's when the door may get slammed in your face after you ask that one. So Spotlight, terrific.
Spotlight.
All right. Okay.
There it is.
And All the President's Men, of course.
Okay. I was wondering if that was one of them, because one of my favorites.
Yeah.
What movie, another movie question, has the worst depiction of a Boston accent?
I think it's oh my gosh, I hope no one doesn't like me about this. There was a recent movie that was supposed to be Spencer.
Okay. Yeah.
It had a Wahlberg in it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Does this
sure.
ring any bells?
No, I don't think anybody liked that movie.
No,
Definitely not the Spencer fans.
don't know it.
I know, and I tried to like it because I love Ace Atkins beyond anything that you could possibly imagine, but I just couldn't listen to that.
Yeah, I don't think he liked it, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
A Boston accent is very hard to do. I mean, I can say "see you later," and that sort of sounds Bostonian, but I don't even try otherwise.
Yeah.
It's very elaborate and exotic to do.
I love that commercial that has the guy Jim from The Office and
the park in the car.
Park the car, lost
And
David
yeah.
Bowie, some.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Boston.
Okay, your final question.
Oh,
This is not the normal craziness. This actually takes a little thought. If you could transport yourself to the beginning of one of history's major stories, which one would you most like to have investigated as it was happening?
well, I think about Nellie Bly sometimes going undercover into the insane asylum. I forget some elaborate name, like the Home for Wayward Women in New York so many years ago. I think about how brave she was and wonder if I would have done that. I worked in Washington on Capitol Hill during Watergate as the Watergate case was unfolding, and really, would go to my front porch and get the paper every morning, get the Washington Post and look at it and say, really? Can this be true? So that would have been amazing. And sort of the McCarthy hearings, maybe would have been really interesting to see that from a different perspective.
Wow.
This is a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. And as soon as we close, I'm going to think of all the things, that would be. What do you think? What would you think?
This it would have been a very dark subject, but it would have been interesting to be a journalist, finding out about the Holocaust, learning about the Holocaust going on, and then delving into that when you have, the shadowy sources that a lot of times you can't even reach because of the, what was going on with the regime. Mm-hmm. So something like, that to me would have been compelling, at least to want to pursue. How successful you would be at doing that's a whole nother question. But
wouldn't you love to find out what happened to Amelia Earhart?
Yes, yeah,
sure. That's just so tantalizing to me. But that's why sometimes when they teach history and they don't make it into stories, they make it into dates. And even as we're talking now, we're thinking about what those things really were and how they unfolded and what we know now and what we wish we had known then.
Yeah.
You just hit like one of my pet beliefs, and that's that if you are a boring history teacher, there's zero excuse to be a boring history. It is the easiest subject to make exciting and to make engaging for
Oh my
people.
gosh, yeah. Right now I'm stuck in the 19th century, late 19th century, New York City, and counterfeiting, and what the Secret Service was doing and investigating one of the big businessmen, New York City contractors, who he had tons of money and all these contracts with Tammany Hall, but he was one of the major producers of counterfeit money in the country.
Wow,
and the investigation into him, that would be super cool to have been part of. I would have loved
or
to.
uncovering Charles Ponzi's scheme.
Yeah.
So that would have been really fun.
I would like to have,
together and figure this
if
out.
I had been guaranteed success and being able to deliver definitive news, I think the JFK assassination for me would have been like, that would have been just perfection.
You know that don't listen, viewers, but that would be a heck of a nonfiction book to be like, to look at some of history's things from like an investigative journalist now saying, okay, which ones would I like to investigate and why?
Yeah.
Should we all do it together?
Yeah,
there we go.
Why not? I'm there.
Talk to you when the show is over.
Yeah.
Well, that is the end, folks. Our time is done.
Oh, no.
Hank Phillippi Ryan, let's raise a glass. You are awesome.
Oh my goodness.
You are a fantastic
Wonderful.
guest.
Thank you. You are wonderful.
You
Thank
truly
questions
are.
I've never heard before. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. Take care.
Well, that's what we do. Cheers.
You too.
Hey, boys. Oh, Hank Phillippi Ryan.
Wow.
He is a ball of energy. She's a fantastic writer, storyteller, investigative journalist. Her book, The First to Lie, came out last August. It was awesome.
Yep.
She's awesome. Her next book coming out did she say September?
September.
Her Perfect Lie.
Perfect life.
Lie. It's all about deceit. She's awesome. But let's raise a glass. Hank Phillippi Ryan, thank you for coming on. Spending time with me and Sean and Mike.
Classing up the place.
Have a drink.
Definitely classing up the place.
Oh, shit. Crew reviews.
Look at this clean shaven fool. Looks like a baby's bottom with a shirt on. God.
Oh, that hurts. Oh, that hurt. I think I cut myself earlier.
Shaved off the beard and we don't even know who he is. Name tag is missing, but he has a shirt. So it must be
Chris's younger brother.
And this is the outro. In 3, 2, 1.
Wait. And as I'm sipping, I'm trying to think about what the heck I'm going to say. All right.
That burns.
Think of a word.
Think of a word?
Yeah, think of a word. Well,
Ketchup.
No,
Gnawbone.
gnawbone, or you could say, gnawbone, or what is it? Forced monkey labor.
Forced monkey. Hey, folks.
The phrase
You've gotten to this point of the show.
What was that TV show? The phrase
one?
is forced monkey labor.
Send us an email at what is it? Is it crew review? What is it?
The crew reviewers at gmail.com.
The crew reviewers at gmail.com. If you've gotten to the point all the way through this interview and you're watching me say this, send us an email with the word
Forced monkey lair.
thank you, Mike. And we'll send you a book.
All right.
Do it.
Thanks, babe. They're the first person to do it.
First person, you bastards.
Like people going, "Where's my book?"
No. The first person. We
All
love you.
760 subscribers have sent forced monkey labor into.
Forced monkey and it has to be spelled properly. All right.
Yeah. And do we capitalize monkey since it's kind of a collective?
Yes, it's a proper
Okay.
noun.
All right. Sounds good.
Not, but do it.
Cheers, boy.